All right, in our first half hour, we took a closer look at what lawmakers in Iowa have been up to this week. And now we're heading over to the Illinois side. Governor J.B. Pritzker is set to give his annual budget address in less than 2 weeks, coming up next Wednesday. And we already know it's not going to be a very pretty picture. The governor has said money will be tight this year, exacerbated by ongoing federal funding cuts. Here to help break this down for us is Ben Szalinski, State House reporter for the nonprofit newsroom Capital News, Illinois. All right, Ben, the governor's office has a new report out that quantifies kind of the impact of these federal funding cuts. What does the report say?
Yeah, really, it just kind of adds up what we've been talking about for so long this year as far as how much the federal government has cut spending going to Illinois. So, for one, we know that just several weeks ago, the Trump administration decided to cut off $1 billion worth of childcare funding for the state. So that's part of this report, even though that money is now on hold, that really makes the budget picture super uncertain with $1 billion hole in there. But it also adds up other things that we've seen throughout the year, such as new changes to SNAP requirements and benefits and administrative costs that the state is going to have to cover. A lot of changes to healthcare that have come in because the federal government is changing eligibility requirements for those programs. So this really gives us a much better idea of the financial situation the state is facing in the coming years as far as what kind of gap exists that is going to need to be plugged.
You know, when I was looking at this report earlier, it was so hard to ignore the impact this is going to have on SNAP in Illinois. Can you talk about what this is going to lead to?
Yeah, so there's as much as I believe almost 300,000 people that could become ineligible for SNAP. So that's one kind of just social service crisis the state is going to be facing. But it's also going to have a massive impact on the budget because states are going to have to cover 50% of administrative costs, which is a lot more than they currently cover. And then the state of Illinois, at least, has a pretty high error rate on SNAP payments, which Congress is trying to incentivize states to lower that. So the state's going to have to pay a whole lot more money for benefits because the error rate is so high. That's $700 million alone right there, which is a very substantial amount in the context of the state budget.
Well, something else that's on the governor's mind is pensions, and it almost seems to be at odds with this issue of having a super tight budget this year. Governor Pritzker wants lawmakers to fully fund pensions by 2048. How does that differ from what the current plan is?
Yeah, really, the current plan is focused on paying off pensions at 90% by 2045. So this is a really substantial change the governor is proposing. But the key here is that the state is going to need to devote a lot more money into pensions. And we just talked about all these federal problems and the hole that's in the state budget because of those federal problems. So lawmakers are going to have to kind of decide, do they want to put more money into pensions from bond payments that expire or extra revenue that's just laying around? Should that be going towards pensions or should that be going to covering SNAP, for example? And that's really the question I think lawmakers are going to be dealing with. It really sounds like the governor is really pushing this because it help the state's credit rating and long-term liabilities. But in the short term, it's not really clear if the state can actually afford to go forward with his plan.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just thinking about I'm standing right now in Moline, where the city pays, or almost over 2/3 of its annual budget goes toward pensions locally. So how likely is it these plans to put more money into it would become reality?
Yeah, it's a good question because the money that goes towards pensions is kind of funded a little bit differently. It's not really part of the general fund funding every year, but a lot of the money that goes into the pensions is, kind of taken from various different places where, there's money left over from this program that is expiring. We can put it towards something else. I don't know that it's realistic to expect that lawmakers are going to be able to put all this money in, just given that there's all these gaps in the budget that are going to have to be closed this year.
Well, Ben, before I let you go, I want to touch on the Illinois Attorney General's office. Recently, they won the first ever civil hate crime lawsuit, and it all centers around a story from our area up in Carroll County, Illinois. What happened here?
Yeah, this is kind of a crazy story where there was basically a dispute between a white neighbor and a black neighbor over some lawn care issues. This white couple displayed a bunch of extremely racist signs and other activity. They had, signs out in their yard of racial slurs, swastikas, the Confederate flag. They pointed that towards their black neighbor's house. There's even an alleged attempted sort of imitation of a lynching that occurred in this situation. And the state law gives the attorney general power to pursue civil charges and civil liability for people who are accused of hate crimes. So the attorney general won this case with a civil lawsuit, being able to get restitution, other forms of payment back towards the victim in this case.
So interesting. Ben, as always, thank you so much for your time and your expertise today. I really appreciate this.
Thank you, Shelby.
And for you guys at home, you can find all of our political coverage up on our website, WQAD.com.